Hello there, this is Cherie Burton, and welcome to Women Seeking Wholeness. This is a podcast for women who long to feel, express, and be who they really are. Now, we are coming off a heavy and intense and deep, 6-part Mary Magdalene series, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. I know I very much found personal meaning and purpose around offering that. Deborah Kagan is a speaker. She's an author. She's a mentor, and she calls herself a Mojo Recovery Specialist. We're kind of going to define what Mojo means in the course of our discussion, but it's kind of like what she calls the practice of being a turned-on woman. So immediately, where do you go to that in your mind? Like, right, sexuality. But really what we're talking about is tapping into your innate power to connect with your mojo, your essence, the senses, and finding joy and finding that source of true worth and self-esteem. So from this place, she believes that women can gain increased enthusiasm for life, which translates for great self-confidence, the ability to earn more money, gather more opportunities, more resources, reduce your stress, and really create thriving relationships, not only professionally, but personally. So she is the best-selling author of Find Your Me Spot, 52 Ways to Reclaim Your Confidence, Feel Good in Your Own Skin, and Live a Turned-On Life. And that is, interestingly enough, originally how I found Deborah 7 years ago at a conference where she had a booth. And I was just really kind of enamored with her essence and the way that she just was really comfortable in her skin and really magnetizing and just joyful and grounded and full of goddess body confidence. We reconnected about a month ago at a retreat. So you'll kind of hear that story of how synchronicity was at play in our forming a reconnection. So I asked her to be on this podcast because she has a lot to offer in how to transform everything in your life just by being comfortable in your own skin. Both of us are actually doing retreats in October that teach kind of the same thing, only in very different ways. Deborah's event is in LA, the 11th, 12th, and 13th of October, when my event is in Utah, the 24th, 25th, and 26th of October. And not only is Deborah a popular guest speaker on this topic of mojo, creativity, passion, wealth, and how that's sourced through having that mojo in your life, she's also a philanthropist and community activist. And so she's been on the advisory board of Peace Over Violence. She's the founder, executive producer of V-Day Santa Monica, which is a benefit raising awareness and funds to end violence against women and girls. So this is a woman with a lot of heart and soul. Well, Deborah, we meet again. I have to give everybody kind of some context on how we met. And this is so crazy. You know, when you're supposed to meet somebody, like weird things happen like this. But what year was that? I know you reminded me of this, but when were we at that marketing event in Florida? What year was that? Was it
2012?
2012. So 7 years ago. Oh, cycle of completion, 7 years. So I saw Deborah. I just thought she looked like a goddess. Like, she was just in this like amazing outfit, her hair, like her essence, her confidence, just this embodied female. And then I noticed, she had a booth at this conference, and I walked over and I bought her book, and it was all about the senses, which I'm really into. Like, I've been studying sensory anchoring and senses for emotional healing and spiritual wholeness and that kind of thing for a while, and biochemical healing. So I was drawn to that, and also a little scared of you, Deborah, honestly. Like, you scared me. I only in a good way, like, wow, she's just so open about sensuality and sexuality and who, what this is about. And so like, I was really drawn to purchase your book. And then fast forward 7 years and here we are. I'm sitting in that little tea place in Asheville, North Carolina, heading into a retreat, and you're sitting across the room, well, actually across the table. And all of a sudden I just had this, like when I first looked at you, I'm like, she looks a little familiar. And then I just did a double take, and all of a sudden I like interrupted the conversation you're having with somebody, and I pointed at you and I'm like, did you write a book? And you're like, yeah. So then you and I just go through this whole journey together at Soulfire Retreat in North Carolina, which was an absolutely phenomenal experience of being embodied and tapping into our soul and driving forward our essence and all of these things. And you had a very interesting physical ailment, which we can or cannot talk about, but I think it lends itself to kind of maybe where the territory we're going into. But I just want to give people that context because it's crazy. Sometimes when you meet people, you'll feel like a soul spark, and then maybe they never happen upon your path again, or maybe they have a piece for you in your journey. But in our case, I met you and then I met you again, and it was almost like a second witness, if you will, of okay, there's something that we need to explore together. And so, anyway, with that very long introduction. Can we tell them what your ailment was? Are you open? You're a pretty open book. So
hi, everybody. Nice to meet you. Here's my ailment. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, first of all, I am so happy to be here with you. And I think it's fascinating the way that people will come into our lives and how we will, literally just run into each other. And I love that you remembered me. That's sweet. And I mean, just again, full synchronicities. And it's since we're going to talk about senses, like it was not lost on me that I was going on this retreat to be a participant, which normally, and I for many years now, I lead and I've been in a leadership position. And so it was this first time in quite a while that I was participating in a long, a week-long retreat. And a few days before I traveled, my eye started to act up. And I was like, well, this is interesting. I'm going on something called Soulfire. And basically I had an eye infection. And so it turned out it was a virus, and I didn't look like myself. Right. So there was that aspect of it. My eye was super swollen. I still recognize you though. Like watery. Which is amazing. That's what I said. I was like, I can't believe that you could see past the whatever's going on in my face. Because that time I didn't even really know what it was. But, and it was funny because I think in all of our journeys, and I know we'll talk about this, but the concept, of course, that our bodies have all of this wisdom, our bodies have all the information that we need. And it wasn't lost on me that this particular, ailment was occurring on this particular retreat. Mm-hmm. And it did take me, 2 days into the retreat to have it sort of smack on my head, the most obvious, as my mother would say, sort of like master of the obvious statement. But I was like, oh, yeah, the eyes are the windows of your soul. Mm-hmm. That's what we always say. And so not surprising that here I am going to get to this next layer of who I am as a woman who supports other women. What does that look like in life? How can I authentically even go deeper and share more of what I'm here for? And what is this next layer of seeing, right? To have vision. And I teach, my clients, and I talk to women and friends. It's like, what is your vision, which taps into your desire and having that connection to that. And so without vision, literally and figuratively, it can be very challenging to create in your life. And therefore, like I said, wildly amusing that this happened on this particular retreat. And I appreciate and really love that you still recognize me.
Well, and it's funny because I flew when I had to fly out of LAX, coming back from a writer's retreat the following weekend. I stopped by your house, and it had gone to the other eye by that point. But you looked a lot better. I mean, looked a lot better. But it was just interesting because I'm like,
gone to the other eye after retreat.
Oh, that's yeah. So, but with it, that kind of leads into what we're going to talk about because. And it reminds me of a quote, the body sheds the tears the eyes refuse to shed. And the disease is written on the man somewhere. In other words, like whether it's our own issues, generational issues, collective consciousness issues, our bodies always send us the message, and we get to climb in and heal that or have awareness around it. And it was just beautiful that you already knew, like you're sitting in the tea shop going, yeah, because you can be the presence behind that and go, hey, something's ready to clear out. Something's ready for me to see something in a new way. It reminds me also of that biblical scripture in Proverbs or something, where there is no vision, the people perish. So it's kind of what you were saying.
Mm-hmm.
There's spiritual vision, there's physical vision, and with that soul vision living somewhere in the middle. Okay, so I think people would find your story very fascinating, because here you are now. You facilitate events, really powerful events for women. You lead. You're a leader of women. You bring women back into their soul, into their bodies. But like every woman who has stepped into some kind of a leadership capacity or become on the forefront of changing and healing the planet, you have had to go through your own series of not so fun things. I call them rites of passage into the healer or the light worker field. But I know you've shared with me some of your personal journey. And if you wouldn't mind sharing with our listeners kind of what brought you the darkness into the light, and how you were able to step into the power of empathy, and also, coming from the descent into now this ascent where you're able to help other people in their healing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting, all of our journeys. They sometimes seem very circuitous. It's almost like they make no sense. And at some point, it makes sense. And I got to that point of like, well, this actually makes sense. Over probably 15 years ago. And it's interesting because, I always say, hey, look, I came from a functionally dysfunctional household. Like lovely parents, good people. They decided to get divorced when I was young, and then they both got remarried. And that's when things started to get a little crazy in my world. There was a separation in terms of just the time that I got to see my father. So I didn't get to spend time with my father really much growing up. So there was this sort of loss, abandonment, feeling and experience on that side. And then with my mom's second husband, he was very abusive. And so that was living in a home of domestic violence for 8 years. And we're very resourceful. Kids, you have kids. I'm sure many of the listeners out there have kids, right? If you ever
they're resilient. Kids
are super resilient, but they're resourceful. Like if they want something, they're going to figure it out. And so for me at 13, I heard somebody in grade school say they were going to boarding school. I didn't know what the heck boarding school was. Once I found out, I was like, well, great, I'm going to go because I got to get out of this house, and I ended up going to boarding school. So it seemed wonderful. And it was wonderful on many levels. And basically because of me leaving that household after my freshman year, my mom realized how bad it was. And she ended up leaving, which in the end was great. But the other thing that happened, during all that time was I was self-soothing. and back in the day, that was drugs and alcohol. And I just wanted to, I wanted to not be in my body, right? It was just too painful, everything, the abusive household, the insanity there. And so I started, using drugs and alcohol at a young age and smoking cigarettes and, doing everything young and quickly. And so being resourceful, at boarding school, I ended up befriending the local drug dealer, because that's what you do when you want to make sure that you have a ample supply of whatever you want. So that seemed really smart. But the unfortunate thing, on the surface, unfortunate thing that happened was the end of my freshman year, he thought it would be a great idea to break into my dorm and rape me. And so that was my first time I had sex. And it was not the way that I wanted to have sex for the first time. And yet that's what happened. And, of course, it was traumatic. It was scary. Also, so many things about that. And I didn't tell anybody for years. Because many people who go through this experience, you also feel like, I thought it was my fault, right? We were like, I knew this guy, and I was buying drugs from him, and so all of this, all of these things that you think that you brought it on. Well, of course, nobody brings this on. I mean, this is not something that somebody welcomes or invites into their life in that sense. So it took me many, many years before I even shared that. And then when I did, it was like, you couldn't shut me up. And I ended up sharing it. I went to film school. I'm originally from New York City, and I ended up going to New York University and was in film. And so I made one of my early films about that experience. And that's how I ended up breaking my silence. And it was about 6 years after it had happened. And that was so freeing. And really, so I'm just really compelled in this moment because, we're in a new era. Obviously, we're in this era of Me Too. We're in an era where women's voices are much stronger, and there's a lot more power behind them. And yet there's still so many women who are keeping silent and holding the shame of these types of experiences. And whether you don't need to necessarily share it with the world, but I highly encourage you, if you're out there and you're listening and something like this has happened to you and you haven't shared this with anybody, find somebody, whether it's a dear, friend that has the capacity to hear this and hold space for you, or find a professional. Because one of the things I found was when you hide and when you hold these kinds of secrets and you hold shame and you hold these fears, and particularly when they're around our bodies and our sexuality and our sense of who we are as a female on the planet, it will corrode your insides and will really deteriorate your confidence, your own enjoyment and pleasure in your own skin. And ultimately, that can lead to greater things like problematic relationships, but even bigger things like illness, like legitimate sicknesses.
Well, there's that whole like pressing down, depressed, pressing down, joy, sensuality, when difficult emotions start to arise, the natural inclination is to swallow it, stuff it, press it down. And this is why we have many of the illnesses we have today, but particularly I would say in trauma situations where there hasn't been a way for that. Once it comes to the consciousness, and because some people have really repressed it, but like in your case, it's not that you actually repressed it. You were just holding it in as a protection. And no matter what the reason is or why we do it, eventually, if we don't find a way to let it out, it will literally like run us to the ground, health-wise, spirituality, self-protection, relationships. Yeah. So I'm going to amen what you just said, because I see it a lot with especially sexual abuse.
Yeah. And, it's interesting because I think the original question was like, how did I get to, what I do today? But so all of that is, my backstory. And it is, the deeper why of everything that I do is about helping to end violence towards women and girls, violence from the outside and also violence just from ourselves. And when I say violence to ourselves, that is lack of self-love, lack of compassion for oneself, lack of, real reverence for who you are in this life. And so, that is the deeper why of all my work. And my philanthropy is all focused in that area as well. However, when I really shifted into what I offer today, and this is what I've been doing for about a little over a decade now, and specifically working with women, that happened, was I was in a marriage that was a wonderful friendship and with a great guy. But during that time we were together and we were married it was about 6 years, and I got married, young in my 20s. I felt like I completely lost a whole part of myself. And I call that my mojo. right? Which is, I refer to that as life force or chi or ki or prana, right? But our mojo is, it's that life force that everybody has. We're born with it. It's never gone away. But what I realized is the volume dial gets turned down. And the volume dial can get turned down by, traumatic experiences, again, certain relationships, jobs, anything that starts to rob you of your personal magic and your own power. And so it was through the course of this marriage that I went, well, who am I? Like, where did I go? What the heck? What happened to me? Mm-hmm. And once I really took the courageous step to leave that marriage, I dedicated myself to learn everything I could and, work with teachers and mentors and, do whatever I need to do to find out what does it take to be a woman who's truly connected to her feminine power. What's it like to be truly embodied in all ways and enjoy being in this body, having access to sensuality and sexuality, and really love pleasure in all forms.
And not feel guilty about it. Because I have to interject right here. Because you and I had talked about this before. Mm-hmm. You did not get the same programming. Like you said, you were kind of like Catholic in theory, right? But you weren't, you didn't attend. Or did you? I can't remember. No, you're Jewish.
No, I was raised Jewish. And, but not, once after I went through the bat mitzvah ritual, I was done with religion. So I very much consider myself, a spiritual being and not a religious being.
So you didn't.
My background is.
Yeah. So sorry to interrupt you. I feel like that is a major distinction for many women, myself included, that when you're raised in a high demand religious environment, there's a high moral, and it's responsible, of course, high moral code that includes chastity and purity, largely aimed, I would say, at girls more than boys, but it's definitely strong for boys too, probably even more shaming with pornography and masturbation that boys deal with in religious cultures. But for girls, it's like your body. It's like, modesty and that link to virtue and all of the programming that comes along with, Eve being the temptress and my religion didn't necessarily paint that picture, but I think America and most and Europeans definitely, but most nations started with some kind of religious ideology that shamed sexuality at its core roots. And because, I can't remember who I was talking about this before, but America was founded by, Puritans, pilgrims who
Puritans.
Yes. Yeah. And so anyway, it's not just, it's not isolated to any certain religion. It's just, if you had a very religious background, it's really difficult to see sensuality and sexuality as spiritual. So that's why I love that we're talking about sex and spirituality. I just wanted to say that. As you're talking about your background, you had a freer, I don't know, would you say that were your parents very shaming about that, or?
No, look, I didn't get a lot of information about it when I was growing up, but the messaging I did get was, as a woman, your job is to be pleasing to the man. Okay. And, that's a very outdated, ideology. And not to say that pleasing your chosen partner, man, woman, whoever, is a bad thing, but to have that be your purpose and putting yourself aside and not having any concern for your own pleasure, your own experience is damaging. Right. And that was sort of my mountain that to climb, and to really understand and look at, again, the difference and what it does mean to be a woman in her own power, who enjoys her own pleasure. And I'm not talking about just pleasure in the bedroom. I'm talking about pleasure in life, pleasure in eating your food, pleasure in taking a walk, pleasure in what you do and how you share that in the world, like pleasure on all levels. So
and that word pleasure,
there was a lot of reprogramming.
Some of my programming is that word pleasure means self-indulgence, frivolity, irresponsibility. You know what I'm saying? Like that's some of my programming,
Sure.
whether I internalize that and that's just me, or, as a whole, like, who are we these to be this, put that off. Oh, there is a saying in my religion, put off the natural man, which means all of your sexual pleasures. Which,
well,
different people interpret it.
Yeah, suffering. But suffering's been revered, right, for centuries. Because if you suffer, then you can be, one of the pack. Then it's almost like this badge of honor.
Yeah,
how much you suffer.
The martyr syndrome,
right? Exactly. And ultimately, that's one way to do it. And if that's your choice, and if you consciously choose that, great. But if you haven't consciously chosen that, then I want to talk to you because my whole, my passion and my joy and so much of, what I do is helping to wake up women's consciousness. And I always say, like, when you have the awareness, then you can take the new action. And we've got we call it Kaganism or a Mojoism. But it's a meme that we put out, fairly regularly, which is awareness without action is just mental masturbation. So, right, like, we can have lots of awareness, can do the workshops, read the books, but if you don't put it into action, again, there's this same sort of a bit martyr, suffering, keeping oneself in more of a victim place.
Yeah.
Which is much more accepted.
Yeah. And I'm being in my business where I mentor a lot of women in business, and especially when they hop on and first start mentoring with me, there's a definite a guilt thing about, and it's avoidance too, for just showing up, just the actual act of showing up. That's half the battle, wouldn't you say, or more than half the battle. And I always tell people,
so interesting. I've just posted.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, so I was just saying that, I was just posed this question actually at a dinner party I held the other week, which is, what does it look like and what does it mean for you to be truly seen?
Yeah. And we're afraid of that, aren't we? Visibility, I will say, women in visibility is a major dilemma of the psyche. Because on the one hand, men are more visual, right? And so and women, where we have more of a draw for the aesthetic appeal of prettying things up, if you will, or beautifying and creating order. And so we also have the shadow side of that, which is kind of what we tell kids early on, which is, children are to be seen, not heard. But then we flip that and we don't even want to be seen or heard. It's kind of like that Me Too movement you were talking about, is like taking, prior to that, like, women have traditionally taken the back seat to let men step out and be more visible or to be more vocal. And with that shift comes hey, I have stuff to say. And if we can, for me, and I wanted to talk to you about body shaming, because I think the visibility issue with women has to do with, not necessarily just the shame around spiritual stuff, but just what we see in the media and what we're comparing ourselves to with our bodies. It's like most women, I would say the vast majority of women I know are pretty hung up on their physical form. like to the point where it's hard for them to have a sexual life. It's hard for them to be sensual. It's hard for them to feel comfortable in their own skin. That's why your work is so important because it is a major, major issue with women. I'm sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit, but how did you come to peace with your body? Because you just strike me as somebody who just is like, hey, here is me. You have that physical prowess about you. How did you come into that? Like especially with what you've been through. I mean, it's pretty interesting to me that you would walk the path of like coming out of that and then now wanting to teach it. But then like there's people who teach and then there's people who like live and be it and they're embodied in it. And you strike me as someone who's met that in your body, which is cool.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's very important for me to walk my talk. And I always say, hey, I'm the guinea pig for all the work that I do share. And that being the disembodiment piece, that is the real tragedy of so much of the abuse. And, when people have sexual abuse and rape and that, physical trauma, because what happens is that you want to leave your body, and rightfully so. But then nobody actually ends up talking about how to get back in your body, how to be embodied, how to feel comfortable in your own skin. And to me, that's been one of the biggest tragedies of, all of this, just all of these things that happen to people. And then very, very rarely has it been talked about that this is the major byproduct of what happens. And so, for me, it was a selfish mission in the beginning. Like, I want to be in this body. I don't want to be uncomfortable. I don't want to feel like embarrassed. I didn't want to feel like I had to hide or that somebody was going to, only like necessarily want me for my body. I wanted the experience of feeling power. I wanted the experience of feeling great and confident. Just walking in a room, sitting on a beach, wherever it might be, right? To have that just deliciousness that is possible. I mean, we are here in a human form. And so I always say, like, let's not have too much reverence for the body. It's basically a rental vehicle. Okay. I mean, that's the way I look at it and talk about it. It's like, we come back and we get this, rental vehicle. We have no idea how long the contract is for. And this is the thing we're cruising around life with, however long we're here. But, I also want to make a point that, when we look at children, and this is how I know, like, every single one of us was completely born with our mojo. Like, we all have it.
Yeah.
Like, every single you listening has your mojo. You might have the volume dial turned down to mute, but you've got your mojo in you right now.
And you would just call that like,
never lost it.
And you would call the mojo just like the magic of your essence, kind of like just your you-ness, what makes you the real you, the juicy you, right? I mean, how would you define the mojo? Soul?
Yeah, again, that's a great way to talk about it. I would say it's life force. So there's, and this has been proven in quantum physics at this point, right? There is this energy behind energy. And they actually, in the late 60s, discovered it, and they nicknamed it the God particle, because they were like, I don't know how to explain this, but it's this stuff that is actually moving all the other energy. And so that is everywhere. It's in everything. It's in us. It's in the plants. It's in your home. It's in your desk. It's in your clothing. I mean, it is life force. And the life force, right, it's vibration. So if we talk on just an energetic level, there are certain things that vibrate at a slower, lower density. And those are the things that are physical, hard, right? So that have more mass, like a house or a wall or a piece of furniture. But then there's things like light and sound that are high vibration and move really, really fast. And then there's everything in between. Okay. So and all of that is life force. So
Yeah.
it's this energy that you are born with. Again, we're all born with it. And it's the thing that people feel from you. Like, when you've walked into, or you've watched somebody walk into a store, a restaurant, a party, a family gathering, whatever it might be, and you just notice somebody who walks in, and you can tell how connected and how in their body they are just by the way they move. They don't have to say anything. They don't have to wear the best outfit. They don't have to have the hottest haircut. They don't have to be the most conventionally attractive person there. And yet there are some of those people, right, who just have it because they are, living with their mojo consciously. Again, we all have it. It's whether you are letting yourself have the volume dial turned up.
So you're saying it's kind of like your presence. It's your own unique presence behind the whatever's happening, whatever's going on. It's just the presence you hold. And I know what you're talking about, because even at our Soulfire retreat, when each of us got into our real souls that last night, we were all so different. And it was truly breathtaking to behold. So I just want to say, I think that at least I had this picture in my mind that if I stepped into my true essence, my true mojo on, right, and just became completely ensouled and got in touch with the magic that is me, that I had an idea of what I thought that was. But when I got out of my logic brain and just went with my body's movements and what I actually enjoy and what I actually want, without all the exterior programming, what I think I should be, it just flowed. And it was like, oh, this is me. And I was just writing and writing and writing, because I finally gave myself permission to feel alive. So yeah, that unspoken presence, that it literally heralds your arrival into a room. You already know this, nonverbal communication. It's so powerful.
Mm-hmm. And I love what you said also. It's like that you allowed yourself to come from your body. And, that's one of the most important things. And that's a big piece of the work that I certainly share. And when I watch the women, who either come to the live events that I host, but certainly the clients that I work with, but when I watch them make this leap from only living in their heads into their body, it's as if somebody just turned the lights on. Like the lights were dim, and now all of a sudden there's brightness. And you see it through their eyes, you see it, again, in their body movement, you see it, it's just it's emanating. And, imagine, look at kids. And when we look at little girls, the majority, because there's always a few exceptions to everything, but, the majority of little girls all they want to do is shine. And all they want to do is be seen. And all they want to do is, play and have, they're just full of light. And that is mojo, right? So if you ever question that we have it, simply go hang out around some kids, under 5 years old. There's no question that every single being is born with it.
I happen to have a 5-year-old little girl right now, and it's reminding me of when my older daughter was that age 15 years ago. But sometimes I wonder if this is why these children were sent to me at an older age, because they came through private adoptions, as you know, and sometimes I'm like, I'm really missing the boat here. They are teaching me. I just need to get out of the way and learn. If I'm in a time in my life where I'm truly trying to step into my soul work, my soul essence, the expression of who I am, just freedom, liberty, all that. You're right. All I have to do is really look at my little kids. And as I have a 6-year-old boy too, and it's interesting when we're talking about the body shaming aspect. I mean, little girls do not have that. They see their bodies as the vehicle to everything and anything, and they have no qualms about streaking or exploring or getting dirty, getting their feet in the mud. They don't care if their hair is combed. I mean, I don't know at what age that shifts, but when it does shift, I don't know. Have you ever heard of the book Reviving Ophelia? Are you familiar with that?
Yeah. It's a great book.
Yeah. And she talks about, I think it's around 11 or 12 for most girls, where we just, all of a sudden, we're not little girls anymore. We have to grow up, and it's basically a sensory deprivation, what we have to step into in the name of school and responsibilities and all these other things. So, yeah, kids. Oh, there's so much.
Kids. And the other thing, because people, the other thing that people always say is, well, how do I connect with my mojo? And, how do I make that leap? Where do we start? And this goes back to kids, because one of the techniques, which is, you can see it through many different philosophies and many different methodologies, is simply deep belly breathing. If you watch children breathe, and again, young children, from, 3 and under, they are breathing from their bellies, right? That deep belly breath. And their bodies are simply happy to receive that level of breath low in their bodies. Mm-hmm. And our low belly is actually the home of our mojo. That's where, the creative life force lives. And it's not a coincidence that, as, a female body who makes, can, if you choose, or, this happens, we can make babies, right? Where are they grown? Your low belly, mm-hmm. right? That is the massive creative life force. I mean, creating a whole person. And growing them,
and just that belly. That whole second chakra is the energetic, or center of creation and magnetism and power, moving up into the third chakra. But yeah, that area, I hadn't thought about that before, the deep belly breathing and the connection to creation. But that totally makes sense. I love it. I'm going to go watch my kids breathe.
Yeah, and then you go, deep belly breathe, right? Because what does deep belly breathing do? It actually gets us into our bodies. Now you can say, well, I'm breathing all the time, Deborah, but here's the thing. You're not. I mean, you're not consciously breathing all the time. Thankfully, our bodies do that on their own. And mostly we're breathing up in our, barely below our collarbones. Okay. And the breath that is just under the collarbone, right above the heart center, that is more fight or flight breath. So that never actually allows you to sink in, to mm-hmm. relax, to have a sense of calm and peace and confidence. The deep belly breathing gives that to you. And once you start to get comfortable, because in order to deep belly breathe, you must have a relaxation in your low belly. But for those of us, and again, or most people who are just living in the modern day, there's so much tension in the low belly, whether it's from shame, whether it's just from life stress, whether it's from body shaming and you have to have a flat belly or whatever.
We're taught to suck in our gut all the time. Like, who are we to let our belly hang, mm-hmm. That's definitely an area.
Well, that's why I call it the goddess pooch. Because
my friend Vanessa,
ever since I was even
my friend Vanessa calls it the mound of Venus.
Oh, that's a little bit lower.
I think I'll stick with goddess pooch.
Yeah, absolutely. Venus Mound. I'm happy to talk about Venus Mound, but that's definitely a little lower.
Oh, I thought that was supposed to be that like womb energy or womb center, but see, that tells you how much I know.
I'm sure. Hey, the phrases are probably interchangeable for interchangeable parts.
So belly breathing, deep belly breathing, lands you right into your body. What about for people who are like me, who are really left-brained? And I mean, I've studied deep breathing techniques and I love it. And like, I have a really hard time just letting myself not be in producer mode. Like, what's next? What needs to be done next? Or I'm in over analysis because my background is in kind of like psychoanalysis stuff. I'm always trying to figure stuff out, make connections to how things and why things happen. So I know breathing is important for that. Do you have anything that lands people straight out of just that over-analysis mode? I mean, aside from belly breathing, because I even find that when I'm doing deep breathing and I'm trying to still my mind, I know it's impossible to not have thoughts. I mean, anyone that tells people that they're not going to have thoughts or like, yeah, there's no way. So how do you get out of just that over-analysis and just let your body, because I experienced that at the Soulfire retreat. I was like, then I came home and I'm like, I can't be in nature all the time. I can't be with my soul sisters all the time. It's loud. There's distractions. There's responsibilities. Am I totally making sense? Like, how do you reframe all of that to where you just let it be?
Well, it's a practice like anything. It's as if you were choosing to, start to eat more healthfully. In the beginning, it's a little more challenging, and especially, like someone like you travel a lot, so it can be more challenging on the road to eat healthfully. And yet, the more you do it, the more you find your shortcuts, you find your ways, and it becomes more of your lifestyle. And it's the same thing with getting out of our heads and being in our bodies. Now, look, our heads are super important. And from our life above the neck in our heads, this is where the masculine, not male, right? Masculine as a quality, that energy lives above our neck. Feminine energy, and again, as a quality, not as a gender, because we have both masculine and feminine.
Mm-hmm.
The feminine energy lives in our bodies. So we need and we want both. But what you're speaking to is an epidemic that I've been talking about for about a decade, which is the masculinization of women, which is, women who are super strong, brilliant, go-getters, and spending all of their time in their heads, right, and not in the body. And that's why, I think we're having such a resurgence of getting in touch with the divine feminine, getting in touch with our feminine power, so on and so forth. But, so belly breathing, it's like, think of it as a daily, practice, as if you would go get a glass of water. Not like, oh, I have to sit down and spend, 10 minutes and, sit in lotus position and, have Tibetan bowls. No, you don't need to do it that way. It's literally sit at the desk, realize that your shoulders are up by your ears. You're kind of all of a sudden stressed out. You've got whatever project. So the kids are screaming. You take a minute and you go, okay, 3 deep belly breaths. 3 deep belly breaths. And that's it. And so that's one way. But the other thing that is one of the fastest ways, and you mentioned this when we first started talking about my book. The reason I wrote that book was really a cheat sheet for myself, because the whole book is about easy, simple ways to consciously use your senses. And when we consciously use our senses, then we get into our bodies, right? We're experiencing our life through our senses every day, 24/7, always. However, we're doing it unconsciously. And when we wake that up, and we wake up our conscious use of senses, then we begin to get embodied. Then we start to feel good in our skin. Then that volume dial on our mojo gets turned up. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the best ways.
And I would assume that I would assume that getting out of your head by osmosis would lend itself to, like, you're not feeling the shame and guilt or just experiencing life. You're just being versus thinking or analyzing. It's just visceral. Yeah. It's just real. It's tactile.
It is. And, it's interesting you said just being, because we've also been sold a bill of goods, that the formula for life, right, we've been told is you got to do a bunch of stuff to have a bunch of stuff. And then you can be, fill in the blank, happy, rich, successful, loved, whatever. But that's an incorrect formula. Mm-hmm. Totally incorrect. And so this is the other thing that I, sort of bang my drum on, basically, which is the real formula is you got to be first. Who are you going to be about it? How are you showing up? Right? Are you allowing yourself to be a person, a woman connected to her power, feeling, her own mojo, right? Being a contribution in a way that allows all of your self-expression to be there. So the first thing is being. And from that being, then you're actually going to do different things. Because when you are being more of your truth and more self-expressed, the actions you take will be shifted and they'll be in alignment with who you are. Mm. And after you then take the action, then you're really going to have what you desire. Right? So that's the actual recipe and formula for what I call a mojo-licious life, which is be, then do, then have.
Yeah, I love that. My research I've done over the years with healing depression and just the biochemistry, I guess, of healing from a more of an organic physiological standpoint is that the senses are feel-good portals. And they wake us up, they enliven us, they give rise to our joy centers, and they actually can be very instrumental in healing depression. That's why I got into emotional aromatherapy and touch and self-anointing with essential oils and things of the earth as a means to literally wake people up. Dormant centers in the area of the brain that's responsible for all of our autonomic nervous functions, and that limbic, emotional seat where we're housing stored memory and all of those things. When people start to use things of the earth to awaken their senses, they will experience an expulsion of, sometimes memories will come out. Sometimes they start to do a lot of emotional processing. They could get weepy or angry. And that's all a way of getting things out and clearing those sensory pathways so that they can start to feel good again. It's just our body's way of doing that. And I just think the senses, both the physical senses and the spiritual senses, when we clear those pathways, that's when we start to experience those feelings of joy and meaning and purpose and being and feeling alive. One thing I will say also about the religious programming is there's a definite propensity to have more of a reliance on the afterlife or the future or what the paradise and the next life, if you will, as opposed to your birthright is to have paradise now, to create that in your body, in your being. And even if there's a lot of suffering around you, and even if you have dysfunctional functionality, like you talked about with your family's constellation, there's still a way to cultivate joy and meaning and purpose. So, side tangent there, but when you're talking about conscious use of the senses, it reminds me of like that. Isn't that what sensuality really is? Is just consciously allowing that to express.
Exactly. And that's one of the things I'm so glad you brought up, this clarification, because most people, when you hear sensuality, are thinking sex, and they're not the same. I mean, sex is actually really simple. We complicate it, but sex in itself is really simple. It's two people having intercourse in whatever way, shape, or form that happens. That's what it is. It's not complicated. Okay. Sensuality is the experience of the senses. And again, we're having a sensual experience every day, all day long. We're just simply not aware of it. And I love what you just said, that, when we do connect and use our senses, and it can help so much with this emotional pieces, and to really help with depression. Two things about that. Number one, those depressed feelings, right? Anytime we go through some kind of a trauma or a hurt, it's layered in our body, right? Because everything is energy. And again, quantum physics has proven that at this point. So everything being energy. And so when we have experiences, those experiences get layered in our bodies, and the hurtful experiences create, I call it a kink, right? It's like not the fun kind of kink, like the kink that's not a hardened, the kink that's like the hardened, calcified kind of bundle of blocked energy. And this is why all of a sudden we'll start to feel like we don't have our mojo, because the mojo is moving through us all the time. And yet it bumps up against these kinks in our neurobiology. And that's why we start to feel like we don't have it. It's simply like, you're attempting to drive on a freeway and it's either rush hour or there's a terrible accident, right? And so everything's backed up. That's what the energetic movement is like in our bodies. So when you use things like emotional, aromatherapy or vision boards, right, can be so helpful in terms of the use of sight. It helps you then to smooth out those kinks and those pains and those traumas. And then the mojo and life force starts to move through you. And here's the thing, like I'm, making a case for pleasure and being in your body. But when you are lit up, you give people permission around you to do the same. Mm-hmm. And we do not have time anymore. Like we are in an era of our evolution as a species that we have to have more people turned on, literally and figuratively, because that not only lights up you and then lights up your family, it lights up your community, and then the community connects to the next community, right? That is how we raise and shift vibration on this planet. So your pleasure and your joy is actually helping to create more peace across the world.
Yeah. And isn't that a different shift than just shaming and trying to be perfect and, exactness and structure? I mean, the spontaneity and the liberation around what you just said is so powerful, because it's palpable to other people. It's contagious. Yeah. It reminds me of that Marianne Williamson quote, our presence liberates others, as we give ourselves permission. I can't remember how it's worded, but yeah, like it automatically liberates others just by being in our own presence and in our own, letting our own light shine.
Absolutely. And again, it's like we all lead by example. That's why the walking of our talk is so important for everybody, whatever it is that you're doing in the world, whatever you're passionate about, whatever really means something to you, lead by example, right? I mean, it's like, be the change you want to see.
Yeah.
Gandhi, was pretty spot on with that.
I know. I remember when I first heard that all those years ago, and I'm like, but I don't want to. I just want to learn from other people. I don't want to have to embody that, but like I said, I have this total natural inclination to just be super like analytical and productive and responsible. And so the shift for me, like the second half of my life that I'm in now, is hey, I can be more productive, more wise, and so forth, and get more clarity without having to overanalyze when I am in that sensuality space of experiencing life and just stopping and literally smelling the roses. I mean, there's a reason that that's a phrase, right? Um, so let's talk a little bit about your event coming up. And I know that you and I both facilitate events and retreats, and so you and I both understand the power of someone being in an experiential learning and I guess you could say community environment or connection environment where they're doing nothing but focusing on their own growth, their own soul, their own experience for that space and time, which you have to leave your place of residence to do that. You have to get away sometimes to do that. To talk about this, it's coming up October 11th through the 13th in LA. And it's about sensuality, right? I mean, it's about creating that state of being that we've been talking about. So share with us a little bit more about what you're going to be offering.
Yeah, it's about rocking your mojo, right? It's about owning and being embodied mojo. One of the fun things, and this actually was birthed at that event where we first met, but one of the fun things that I create and the women love is this sensuality bar. And so we have these 5 stations, and they're each of these sense stations, which are great because it gives you that just in-person experiential time of consciously using that sense, and gives you an idea of how fast it can shift you from being in your head into your body, right? And from your head and some stress into more joy and just ease. So that's one of the fun things that we have at the event. But Sheree, the thing about that to me is so exciting every time that this event has happened is, women will come in, they'll be excited and probably a little nervous and not, a little unsure. And then by the end of the weekend, I mean, talk about light. That room is beaming just from all the women who have stepped into themselves in a way that they've had a desire for, and yet just did not have the roadmap to get to. And that is always so exciting, for me as a facilitator, because there's a visual and a palpable shift that occurs every single time. And it's a safe and delicious, environment. I gotta say, I'm incredibly grateful because the women that do come they're spectacular women. I mean, it's just always been a beautiful, beautiful group of women, and friendships are made, and networking happens, and business connections, and it's just a lovely experience.
So I would say, and just knowing you personally, knowing that you do walk your talk, you practice what you preach, you live it. I've been to your home. I've seen your home. I've been with you, in nature. I've seen you in, in your space too, as a present, holding space as a presenter and a leader. And it's interesting. Like, I don't know if you ever experienced this, but usually there's, when you hold space for a gathering, you'll find like a common theme with that particular group. Like they're all gather together for a divine reason. Like they feel called to be there and they don't know why. And then they get together. And then, like you said, boom. So that's cool. That's cool that you're holding space for that. And what we're going to do is I'm going to put a link into the show notes and into the social media posts so that people can register for your retreat. And then they can get a special, if they use my name, which is Cherie. Is it case sensitive, by the way? Does it need to be capital letters? Cherie?
Nope, not case sensitive. Just use your name, Cherie. Yeah, and I want to make sure your listeners can get us a juicy something, which is half off a ticket to the event.
Which is a killer deal. And like I said, I've had your book. It's been sitting on my shelf. I love it. Tell us the name of your book, Finding Your Me Spot. And what's the byline for that?
Yeah, find your me spot. 52 ways to reclaim your confidence, feel amazing in your skin, and live a turned on life.
Isn't that so
Which I realized
cool?
is the subtitle. Yeah, it's like the subtitle for my life. It's
I
just
have to tell you,
what it is.
I used to, so my when I was getting my undergraduate degree, I minored in sociology, and I was part of a large longitudinal thing, and I was really following the study closely because I wasn't married yet. But they did a large study of what men find attractive in women. And would you like to guess? I mean, this was teenage boys all the way. I mean, it was actually younger. It was like preteen boys all the way up through like adult, mature adult men. Would you like to guess the number one thing they found the most attractive in women?
I think I know, and it's interesting because a colleague of mine did a study, but I'm really curious what this study said. I have an inkling, but go ahead.
It's basically what we've been talking about. Women who were comfortable in their own skin and had confidence in their own bodies. That was the most attractive thing to men across the board. I mean, like a landslide. So I found that really interesting.
I know, it's fascinating. A colleague of mine, surveyed his 18,000 people, in his community, men all over the world. And it was the same thing. In the top 3 things that they found most attractive, it always came up: a woman who is comfortable in her own skin. It's a sexy thing. And it's, by the way, it's sexy. It's not only sexy for men, like other women love seeing women who are comfortable in their own skin. It's refreshing. It's exciting.
It's like
it gives you, you're like, oh, you can do that.
It's like Aphrodite, right? We all want to be Aphrodite. And sometimes it's a skill you have to learn. And that's what you're doing with your event, I think, is making it safe, validating that it's a spiritual practice, honestly. And that if you want to be happy, you got to tap into the senses. It's just that simple.
Well, absolutely. Yeah, well, absolutely. More. I mean, happiness is important on its own, but the thing that is also so fantastic and really crucial about this is that when you do get comfortable in your own skin, you see, it does change your level of confidence. And when you're confident, that changes how you show up to your relationships, personally and professionally. So this is why when women step into this place, I call it a Mojo-licious femme space, right? When you get into that space, you do end up having more success in every aspect of your life. Because the fact of the matter is, wherever you are, there you are. And we keep thinking that something outside is going to make the difference. And something outside is going, if we just change this thing outside, if we get the different job, if we date somebody else, if we have a different child, if we, whatever it might be. But the fact of the matter is, it starts within us.
Yeah.
And when you start with yourself and you get comfortable in your own skin, everything around you changes.
And I keep thinking about mothering as it relates to that. I mean, how you
I have a teach your children.
Well, you teach your children more by how you carry yourself and how much joy you find and how embodied you are. I mean, they're going to learn so much more that way than you like speaking to them. It's like that saying, "What you are speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you're saying." And they're not really tuning in. They're so visceral and so in tune with their own senses and their own sensuality, if you will, that they're really just experiencing you as a human. You're not listening to what you're saying.
And what I got to say, actually, I let me share this quick story because you just reminded me, and it brought me to tears. Actually, it was the first time I hosted the Rock Your Mojo Women's Weekend. And we went through deep belly breathing and a woman and another exercise about waking up your power center for your mojo. And a woman went home that night and she shared it with her 8-year-old daughter. And then in the morning, the little girl said before the mom left, like, Mom, I want to do that Mojo exercise again. Do that with me. And so she came back to the event and shared on the mic that this happened and how excited she was, that not only is she getting benefit for her own life, but now because of that, her daughter is having a whole new experience of what's possible, right? For being a girl. And that, I remember I just stood there and wept because I didn't think of that part of it. And it's true, because as adult women, when we do this work, we are helping to change the generations that are coming after us. So hopefully they don't have to go through as much challenge or as much difficulty or the way that we went through the difficulty, because we are getting to give them this new template of what it means to be a woman.
Yes. And that, like you were saying at the beginning of our discussion, we're in a new era. I think that when people think of the phrase, the feminine, or the title, the feminine, they don't always go into that wild, free, fierce place that the feminine lives. And part of that is through experiencing sensuality in a way that brings people joy, right? Like you said, just embodying that and being in that presence, you can literally light up a room. And then you think about how that ripple effect just goes out. It's very inspiring to see that when people have that. And so for sure, we want to direct people to your event. If at all possible, they can make it out there. I do also have a retreat coming up. It's got a different flair to it, but it's definitely about embodying the feminine. And I think too that, when we, let's go back to what we were talking about, like there's action, like there's people, when people take action versus just having awareness. I have found that there's been just such a resurgence in women deciding, okay, I'm worth it. I'm worth spending the money on for myself. And so just, I'm worth my own growth. And really, we are all at the mercy of learning from one another. And so there are things you cannot learn just in a book or by watching a training on YouTube. Some things that are pertinent for our growth require experience. And that's why I love events so much, because women place that value on their own self, on their own growth. And when they do that, especially in such a concentrated, intensive session like that, you can't help but transform.
Absolutely. And, it's like that jump start, right? When our battery on our car kind of poops out, right? But somebody's got to come in there and give it that jolt, that jump start to be able to now, be fully charged and move forward. And it's interesting because the thing I see a lot, with women is putting themselves last. And that has been a huge challenge for many women that have come to my event, that work with me. That is a big hurdle for many, many, many women to leap over, to do things for themselves before everybody else. And I always say, it's like, you've got to fill yourself up. Otherwise, all you're doing is giving and running on fumes. So fill yourself so that when you do give, and look, I know all you listening, like, you give, because that's what we do. Here's the thing, give from a place of overflow. Mm-hmm. And you only get to overflow when you fill yourself. So keep filling yourself. And therefore you will have more to give and more to give and more to give. That starts with you.
Yeah. And it's a choice. It's I'm worth it, dang it, and I'm going to do this choice. Well, Deborah, this has been so fun to talk to you. And I love the direction we went with kind of delineating sensuality aside from like the dirty sexuality, or, thinking of it as strictly as sexuality or as a dirty phrase or a temptress kind of, way of being, if you will. I think we both know it's spiritual practice, and we owe it to ourselves to embody all that our bodies have to offer, every sense, spiritual and physical, and we owe it to ourselves to cultivate that and then show and spread that light to others, so then give them permission to cultivate that for themselves. So thank you for being that lighthouse, because I told you this, like, you attracted me twice. I mean, ultimately it was Sarah the second time that attracted me to her retreat, but like, thank you for showing up in a big way for me and giving me permission on some level of my soul, because you and I have had a couple deep conversations about this. And like, it wasn't necessarily anything you said to me, and that speaks to what we were just talking about. It's what you are. It's what you hold. So thank you for holding that goddess energy that's just so helping to liberate my own sense of my own goddess energy.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad that we got to have this conversation on your podcast, and just even more importantly, that we got to reconnect in life. So thank you.
Sure. Thank you. So great to be reminded that we are sensual beings at our essence and core. And especially as feminine creatures, we have the right to be seen and heard. We have the right to develop that essence and to express that in our own unique way, but first to understand it and to learn how to harness that, because it can be very powerful and it can bring us a lot of joy. So if you're finding some difficulty or maybe some struggles or some blocks around how to really tune into that essence, you can choose between mine and Deborah's events, either one, depending on what your weekends are like in October. 11th, 12th, and 13th is Deborah's event. That is in LA, and she has got a great deal for our listeners. If you go to her event website, rockyourmojowomen'sweekend.com, that's MOJO, rockyourmojowomen'sweekend.com. Be sure to use this code at checkout, Cherie, CHERIE. You'll get some more information on that. Again, I'm getting that full scoop at rockyourmojowomen'sweekend.com. Code at checkout, Cherie. You'll get a greatly discounted rate for that weekend. And then, hey, why not hit my weekend too in October, a couple weeks later in the mountains of Utah, October 24th, 25th, and 26th. Our events are comparably priced for what you're getting and the value that you're getting. And of course, if you head on over to the show notes, you'll find the link to my Stand, Speak, Shine retreat, which is called Embodying Your Feminine Soul, or Step Into Yourself is really the byline I've created there, because it really is about just finding that flow in essence, celebrating the aliveness that is you, harnessing that, understanding it, developing it, listening to it, honoring it, letting it out as a creative expression of who you are, and sharing that with the world. We all need that. We all need that healing just with your presence. So check those two events out. I hope you have a beautiful week, and we will talk to you next time on Women Seeking Wholeness.